Welcome back to another episode of Neutral Webinar. We're here with Michael Kaiser of Hines today to talk about our property management strategies and discuss how we go through pre-development, lease-up, stabilization, and post-stabilization for property management and residential leasing. Mike is on the call today and is going to walk us through a lot of information about property management. But maybe just to kick us off, Mike, you could give a brief background on yourself, your career, and then give us a little bit insight into Hines and Hines Living.
Yep. No, Nate, thank you. And thank you for the invitation to join you today. I'm excited to go through it. So a little bit about myself. So I am our Senior Vice President for Management Services for the Midwest, Southeast, and Canada with Hines. And really what that means is that I think we're somewhat unique in that we really, we're vertically integrated as an organization, but we also have our management services writ large grouped together. And so our living organization, our commercial office, as well as other business lines, retail, all fall under kind of a common organization. And that really allows us to cross-germinate best practices and trends. And so the Hines Living for the Midwest that's serving and partnering with Neutral is part of my organization. So the slide you see here, Hines is actually a privately owned global real estate company. We've been in business for 67 years. Gerald Hines, our founder, passed away in 2000 and has carried on with Laura Hines and Jeff Hines, our co-CEOs. I'd like to shout out that we're honored to have been recognized by U.S. News and World Report as one of the 2024, 2025 best companies to work for in real estate. And we really take that company culture to heart. More broadly, we have a global portfolio really across all product types. And this includes areas where we might be an investor, which is about half our portfolio, as well as areas where we manage for others. And so our under management, all product types, is about 274 million, 857 properties, and really operating across 31 countries and 384 cities. In terms of the Hines Living entity for our U.S. and Canada construct, we're at 15,500 units, and we're operating 46 communities across 28 cities. And so we've been investing in multifamily for quite some time. In 2018, we really decided to launch a management platform because it allows us really to learn and be a better manager. And then what's really exciting about this opportunity with Neutral is really the sustainability culture. It's really been part of our DNA from the beginning, thinking about how buildings can really be more sustainable, more efficient. We have our own goals for a net zero 2040 operational carbon, zero operational carbon. And so as we started to speak with Nate and the Neutral team, I think we were super excited about their thesis for Baker's Place and the Edison and really how they think about that, and as well as the heavy timber thesis and the biophilia that goes with that. Next slide, please. So just from a high level about how we think about service delivery, what's great about this is we bring the professional of institutional ownership together really with hospitality-led, experience. And because we manage both for ourselves and for others in roughly a 50-50 basis, we've really invested in resources that we think, benefit a platform. And we don't differentiate on whether we own or we manage for others. And so, this partnership is really unique. But some of the really unique calling cards I'd highlight is a deep focus on hospitality. That people are renters by choice often, at least at the higher end of the quality spectrum. They really want 5-star hospitality. They want service. They want streamlines. They want you to reduce the friction in their day-to-day lives, and we want to lean heavily into that lifestyle. They want to be focused on how can we make the footprint of these assets that we manage and that our investors and clients focus on more sustainable and really think about the community from that standpoint. And so living between that kind of owner and manager mindset, I think, is something that's important. And then the other thing that I think is really unique about Hines is our engineering excellence. So we effectively have a long history of 67 years of thinking about how we manage risk and maintain asset for the long term for those back-of-house systems, and we bring that to our living. So we've really kind of ported that forward. Next slide, please. So kind of going into the life cycle of the assets. And so I appreciate really the outline that Nate, suggested for this call, because it allows you really to kind of explore each phase and where the management provider and partner really interacts with the client and owner and how we would partner on those moments. So, before we're involved, typically there's going to be some underwriting that goes into the asset. There's market benchmarking, there's asset strategy, design consultants are engaged, really a deep tour of the competitive set, really looking at guiding design parameters for a design team. You may be looking at third-party market studies related to rents and unit mixes. You really determine where your asset should be positioned and what differentiates it relative to the competitive set. And you start the program just thinking about the scale of the asset, the mix of units, the type and scale of amenities, the retail space, the major systems, the MEP design criteria. And so in this case, it was great to see that Neutral really had come out with a heavy timber thesis, combined with a real focus on investing in the MEP systems for sustainability to really reduce the long-term operating expenses of this asset. And really, especially thinking about the Madison market, leaning into what is our impact on the community and how does that really support us through design. So usually after that process is when groups like Hines and the property management team comes in, and it is a kind of advisory basis. And so we'll look at that design, the preliminary designs that come through, and really provide review and feedback. So we're looking at unit layouts and making suggestions based on what we're seeing, either as the larger portfolios or in the markets that we think are applicable, the amenity mix and how that's evolving, really thinking about finishes and furniture and furnishings, including durability. You're really thinking about the resident and the prospect journey. So what is the tour path? How do they interact with the sales office functionality? And then how do they benefit from the common facilities, things like package rooms, parking efficiency, little things like trash and recycling layouts in the systems. And then going in and really doing a deep dive on financial planning. So providing feedback and pressure testing the underwriting expenses. As you start your design process, it's early stages, you're using a lot of benchmarking and kind of high-level assumptions. You start to drill that down into operating expenses and pricing and unit mix. You really think about the ancillary revenue opportunities, and we'll get into that in a little. But in addition, just pure rent, there are other opportunities to drive kind of differentiated revenue to the bottom line, and think about how you can, one, provide customer services, but also benefit that from a revenue stream. And then really as the design starts to firm up and you really have a better idea of the footprint of those amenities, as well as what's happening in the market conditions as you're getting closer and closer to delivering, you prepare a more detailed operating and startup, lease-up, stabilized budgets. And then you start beefing up things like your marketing strategy. You select a marketing firm to come in with a brand identity, websites and collateral. You think about your signage, how do people know this exists? What's your interior wayfinding? And really think, as a manager, we provide some review and feedback to that branding. What's the splash page? When do you launch it? When do you start gathering interest in the asset? So you're really, starting at a run as opposed to a full start when you lease up. And then you really start thinking as you get closer to your design approach. So you're defining the outcomes and experience that you want. How do those align with the design and the investment goals? What are the mission elements? And how do you kind of evolve those with the thesis? Really advancing your thoughts on service levels, the lobby experience, retail and food and beverage integration. What's really exciting about this Baker's Place project is just the way you can think about how food and beverage will integrate in the lobby experience and really activate it. And then, what level of concierge approach that you want to take, and then how that ties to staffing. And then obviously there's a little bit of the nuts and bolts of negotiating and executing, a PMA property management agreement as you move from that kind of advisory stage to actually formally kicking off the services. And that's usually around 150 days before the first unit delivery. You start, formally engaging the manager. And then that's when you start to really go to the next stage, which would be the lease up and bringing people on board.
Mike, one thing I want to touch on here is one of the things and reasons why we really like you guys in Hines is the level of detail you bring to pre-development, both, as you said, in kind of the design stage, opining on things like our trash chute layout or our amenities package, but then also on the other side of things with financial planning of looking at what are our expense assumptions, what are our rental assumptions. You guys have some of the best data, I would say, because you own so much real estate to give us, especially when we're looking at like, okay, how much should we have for our OpEx for a Madison multifamily asset or Milwaukee multifamily asset? You see here on the screen, Hines just opened up 330 units roughly in Milwaukee. And so just a point for our investors and some of our stakeholders, you guys have a lot of data that you're able to give us early on to make our performance more accurate so that we can truly understand what returns hopefully should be based on looking at pre-development to, okay, now we're going into lease-up and then stabilization. How are things performing? And obviously we want to be more accurate. And I think you guys are giving us a lot of data to do so.
That's a great point. Thank you for that. And it is, in that data feedback loop of what's happening in real time in markets and in the multifamily, realm is something that we constantly kind of want to, pressure test, as I said, as we get closer to delivery. So the next slide really is kind of lease up. And so it could be pre-leasing, it could be lease up, but really this is when you start ramping up your operations. So you start with some key onboarding and training for your community manager. And so that's what we call the on-site lead for the day-to-day operations and really the team leader. You have a maintenance supervisor who usually want to join early because you want them to really understand how the building systems run. You want to have them part of the unit turnovers as the general contractor and development team are kind of handing those over to make sure that the experience of the residents day one, you have no second chance to make a first impression, as they say. And so those are key members as well as the leasing lead, hires. It's when you start setting up your financial systems. And so we use a system, and we'll talk a little bit about reporting later, but we use a system called Entrada. It's really a property management program. And so it's a single source of truth for a few different things. It's where you put your leads that are coming in off the SLS, so off of marketing land into that. You're actually administering the leads through that process. You're putting your lease and financial metrics into it, and you're putting your budgeting into it. And so really it is a living tool. And then it also has and we'll talk about the tech enablement, but it's interfaces with the residents themselves. And so really it is really a cohesive solution there. And then we've got central living resources that really sit in our platform that help with kind of training and optimizing, that system as you're kind of kicking off the lease up. You finalize your operating budgets, do final touches on that. And then you start doing some of the blocking and tackling. So you're going to do bid and executed building service contracts. You're going to want to ensure your utility handoffs and setups are complete. You want to do really the training handoff of all the systems from construction and subcontractors into the operations team. You're going to launch your IT and building technology, and then your building commissioning. And then from a leasing standpoint, this is where the rubber hits the road. You're going to start looking at your revenue management. We actually use a number of revenue management systems that inform our unit pricing strategy. There's something that we call amenity-based pricing modeling. So in addition to a unit type that may look similar as you come up the building, each floor might have different views. You may find out that as you go up the building, you want every unit to have an incrementally higher value, so that the top of the building is more valuable than the bottom. Sometimes the activation of the ground plane actually has a high value because you're in an exciting neighborhood. And then you use tools, in the case of technology, Apartment IQ. So you're pulling publicly available competitive set intelligence, and you're combining that with underwriting, that intelligence of what your competitors are doing on a week-to-week, day-to-day basis, and you're setting your pricing strategy. And so you work with the team on that leasing and pricing strategy really based on those inputs. So, and you're also constantly gathering intel in real time. So every lead that comes through your website gets tracked. If they want to do a tour, we can find out actually how long they lingered on our website, which is interesting. So you can find out if they linger on the floor plans for a long time, and then click a tour, they're a little bit more vested than if they spend less time. And you can also find out what kind of model units that they might be more interested in less. And then you also find out kind of a deal by deal basis of what the market competitive set. If you're up against another building in the lease up, you want to constantly be attuned to to the specials that they're having, and kind of play and counterplay sometimes in a lease-up. And then really leasing team management. So you're going to set daily and weekly goals. You want to have training, your constant improvement. You want to assess. We actually use tools like secret shopping. So we'll actually bring third parties in who will assess how our leasing teams are answering questions. Are they leading to solutions? So a lot of times you'll have a little bit of a thought matrix process that you go through with people who come in the door. So you say, what are you looking for? What do you like? Do you like a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom? Do you like these attributes? What else are you looking at in the market? And slowly through that process, what you do is you try to find the perfect unit for that. And so really it is a bespoke solutioning process for that. And that's ultimately going to lead to higher conversion rate and execution rate. Marketing. Oh, just go ahead.
Just to circle on that point. So you're telling me if an investor wants to come and be a secret shopper and look for a unit, you're welcoming that?
We would welcome it. So I think every input is good.
All right. Well, that's going to get blasted out to all 210 investors.
And if they want to lease a unit, that's even better.
Well, of course, if they want to lease a unit, they can pay themselves. But that's awesome that you do the secret shopping.
Yeah, and sometimes it'd be interesting. Like, there's a lot that goes into the leasing, and just really, they're selling a lifestyle and experience, and really how the asset can empower it. It's not about just saying, well, here's a floor plan. Do you need a 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom? And so it's sales, it's experience, it's really understanding what's important to them and pivoting in real time to that response. And also it's the ask. Like at the end of the day, don't let them leave without asking them whether they'd be interested in having, applying today. You'd be amazed by how many times you can go through, a process like this and the person leaves and nobody really asked them to do that. So, for us, that's something we really focus on, that process, and just, and then following up. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. From a marketing standpoint, before you're doing your lease up or as you're launching, you're really doing your marketing launch. You're getting out there. You've hopefully had some people provide some basic information or maybe high level interest on your splash page, which is really a data input form with a few really pretty pictures. But you're going to start launching social media. You're going to do some events. You're going to do community outreach programs. So you think about preferred employer programs. Who are the corporate occupiers who are in your vicinity? It could be schools. And how are you reaching out to them and letting them know that you're there, that you're available, you're interested, and maybe, if they refer a friend, that maybe they get special treatment, in really creating a quarterly kind of marketing playbook. What's the rate or cadence? So what's really a challenge, but also an opportunity at the lease-up stage is you're delivering units, you're doing a full leasing, and you've got people moving into the building that you want to have an amazing day one experience. So there's a lot going on at that moment in time, and you really need to be serving all of those, customers and where they are in the journey at that moment in time. And so, you're doing activations that you're inviting prospective residents to, and you're creating moments that you want to create a better on-site community. And then you're going deep into website performance. So, you stand up a website, you're going to have keyword searches, you're going to, do effectively geofencing, which is anybody who clicks or their phone travels within an area, which could be a competitor that you want to go up against, they become a lead for you as well. So if they search a competitor or search general terms, or you find out that they did a tour of a competitor, you can actually capture them as a lead through your website performance and online tracking. So it's those kind of things that allowed you to really broaden what we call the funnel. And then you want to constantly iterate that. Are we getting the right, we call them qualified leads in? Are we optimizing it to get the maximum number of leads and the highest quality of leads in? And so that's kind of day one. And then you want to convert that funnel. So, as you're kind of backing into how many leases you want to execute, you really have to kind of work back. So in order to get a certain number of move-ins, you need to get a certain amount of applications, and you want to focus on that conversion rate. You want to do a certain amount of tours. So if you can get 40%, 30% conversion of tours to applications, that tells you how many tours you need to hit your markets. Are we hitting that market or not, or that metric or not? To get the right number of tours, you need a certain number of qualified leads. And so you're thinking about that conversion metric. And so it really is an analysis at every step. And what are those conversion ratios? Do they feel right? And when we compare to the market intel, what our competitors are doing, are we getting more than our market share? And do we need to pivot our strategies based on that analysis? And then the last and super important is really that experience. So you're launching that resident lifestyle experience. You're really thinking about what the first resident that moves in, the second resident moves in. Let's make sure their experience is amazing as the 50th resident to move in, and have a lot of those resources set up. And, there might be construction and punch lists and other things that are going on, but you want to do everything you can to create that. And what I think is really exciting here is that's in many ways that resident experience is a tech-enabled and empowered experience. And it's a bullet note here that Nate will touch on in just a second, but across our portfolio and Nate's team and the neutral team is all in here. There's a partnership with Elevated Living. So it really drives both a connectivity to our infrastructure. So they've got integrations with our Entrada system so they can pay their rent. They can see the activities and activations that are going on. They can look at their spaces, but there's also a whole universe of services that they can offer that drive additional revenue to the project. And really, it could be dog walking services. It could be spa treatments on site. It could be something in the neighborhood where we've created a strategic partnership with a food and beverage partner on site or off site. And it really creates a seamless experience between what the on site team is staffing to provide in terms of high touch in the moment in a universe of services that the investors of a site like this benefit from, because there's no really outlay of cost, but there's a revenue source that comes in through this. And so I don't know, Neutral, Nate, if there's anything you'd want to touch on specific to Elevated Living?
Yeah, no, next month we're going to be hosting Conrad, who's the founder and CEO of Elevated Living, but it will be good kind of context to have the property management side for the investors first. And then I would say really what Elevated Living is it is a adjacent to and add-on to what Hines is already doing, and really just amplifying it through really having all these amenities that we're designing into the building, having a lot of the services, having a lot of the hospitality, all kind of culminating into someone's phone on an app, and being able to do everything on that app. So they'll be able to unlock their doors, get into amenity spaces, reserve our hot cold therapy room, reserve personal trainers, etc., all through this app. They'll even be able to submit maintenance requests through the app that Elevated Living builds specifically for each building we do. And so next month we'll be hosting Conrad to give us a lot more kind of deep dive on what the app does, how he develops it, and really how it actually generates revenue as well, because that's the other thing is there's a profit share component that really helps the building's bottom line. But yeah, we'll save that for next month, and we'll keep going here on stabilization.
Yeah. The other thing I'll just touch on there is it's we call it white labeled, which means it's not about the Elevated Living brand. It's really about the Baker's Place brand or the Edison brand. And I think that's an important thing, is you're constantly reinforcing the brand creation. And that's true whether it's the Hines team operating under the Baker's Place, brand, and then really just a hospitality approach. I touched on it earlier, but just every service delivery, how are we doing with a high touch, anticipating the needs, spoken and unspoken, of residents, and trying to create an experience for them. So on the stabilization, this is where effectively you've gotten through your kind of lease-up velocity. And what's interesting is you start thinking about team bandwidth. So all what I'll call the conflicting demands on people's time on the team, in terms of both new leasing and construction handover and learning the project, and kind of the cohesion of the on-site team operating together as a high-performance team. That bandwidth starts stabilizing. You need to look at kind of evaluating all your operating expenses that, what you thought was going to happen in the way the building was operating, ensure that they're working where they were. Maybe there's things you didn't need. Maybe there's things you do need. And so optimizing that, really shifting from a unit construction turnover to a unit turns between leases. And so, you're going to start coming up against the first turn of leases, and you want to really think about that. And I'll touch on that in a moment. And then really advance the Hines has a number of management operations and engineering standards and processes. And when you're in the heat of battle for the first, 7 months, it can be hard to focus on that. But as you start to get stabilized, you want to make sure you're doing those best practices and standards, and you start formalizing those specific to the project. In terms of leasing, you start focusing on that renewal strategy. How do the first renewals, maybe meet up with your market rents, and you start thinking about how you want to really maximize rent revenue and balance it with renewal. And so sometimes you don't want the highest renewal rate you could have because you want to maximize revenue, and that might push some people who, at the beginning were maybe getting, one level of deal, but because you've outperformed on the experience, demand has increased and the market rents have increased, and you want to push those harder. And so there's a balance there to kind of achieving that. And then adjusting staffing as need based on the leasing pace. So when you're in a lease-up, sometimes you need a heavier leasing team. As you start to get stabilized, periodically you can drop a person from that team, or you can split a team member on leasing with another, project to gain efficiencies. And then you really think about marketing. So you start to reset and reduce your marketing spend. So you're no longer having to kind of educate the market on your product. It will become self-sustaining. And so you start to back off someone's expenses to more of a stabilized approach and a stabilized operating expenses. You're really dependent on less traffic coming in new, and you've got a mix of these renewals and new traffic kind of filling in. And it just changes your approach, and you're going deeper on social media. So now you've got this kind of self-generating experience going on. You've got this really interesting sense of community. The building starts taking a life on its own, and you want to continue that content, but you're managing it on a lesser kind of fee because some of it's just happening organically. And then you're constantly looking at online reputation. So you just constantly focused on what's the feedback coming in? What's the feedback coming in online via tools like chat meter and resident surveys? What are the on-site team hearing in real time? And you're making sure you're being super responsive. You're addressing concerns and kind of constant improvement. Next slide is really post-stabilization. So this gets to what I just finished on is continuous improvement. You don't just kind of sit back and then, drive the car from the back seat. You really look at the investor thesis. And this is where I think it's one of the unique aspects of Hines being an owner and a manager is we understand how important it is to maximize revenues and NOI. How can you optimize occupancy? How you can really actively manage the revenue management, aligning with the client priorities. So, where are the levers we can pull? Can we introduce additional services at a premium to drive those ancillary revenues? We want to manage the expiration curve. So the other thing that we do really from the lease up but all the way through is you want a smooth expiration curve. You don't want like all your expirations to be in May and October, because what you do is you then lose pricing power. There's some things you also want to be aware of is, especially in Madison, where a portion of your residents, may be effectively students or professors coming from the school systems. If that's part of your expiration curve, you want to be careful of making sure that you smooth that out and that you really account for seasonality and kind of when you've had historical pricing power at its highest are times when you maybe want to say, hey, I'd like to group more expirations in that pricing power moment because, that's when we can kind of push rates the most. And then you have to respond to market inputs. The reality is there are going to be new competitors that come on the field. There's going to be macroeconomic factors and market supply and demand that are outside your control. And you need to make sure that you don't ignore those and not respond in real time. And sometimes it can be, you've got enough demand that you can just keep pushing hard. Sometimes you got to back off a little bit and make sure that you maximize revenue using those levers. And then you also want to be constantly vetting new real estate technologies. And this really happens at the platform level within Hines. But, we're constantly looking at ways that we can gain more efficiencies through our platform and how we can deliver services more efficiently and thinking about how we can have the maximum efficiency on on-site labor. And so that might mean reducing headcount over time. It may be taking things off the headcount's plate so they can focus more on customer service and experience. And then really accelerating the resident loyalty and lifestyle experience. This is where you really want to deepen that sense of community. You create really personal relationships with your residents. You continuously elevate and innovate that experience and activation in terms of new services. And you, as I said previously, again, you just want to constantly manage that online reputation. And then you want to optimize the building operations. And so this is where we bring leaders from across our portfolio. We call them regional property managers. So that's usually the person who's heavily involved on a week-by-week basis with the on-site team on setting pricing and oversight, as well as probably an area vice president, as well as central resources we have that do assessments. They test the standards and the processes. Are we doing what we say we're going to be doing? Are we doing consistently? Can we gain additional benefits by introducing things that we're not doing? We really want to go deeper on a preventive maintenance program in conjunction with our kind of Hines engineering best practices, because you want to make sure you're maintaining the quality of the asset. You've made this investment. You don't want to find out that a year from now a piece of equipment is failing because it hasn't been maintained properly. And one of the differentiators for Hines is through proper maintenance on a really proactive basis, you really reduce both the number of unplanned failures that impact customer experience, but also the frequency and the kind of impact of those. And so it allows you really to be much more thoughtful about your capital planning as you think about 5 or 7 or 10 years out. And, very often the systems that, according to ASHRAE, which is like the design engineering group, might say have a 10-year lifespan. We find in the Hines world that, the operating life of some of that equipment can be, extended by 20 or 50 or even 100%.
Yeah. And I think, Mike, that's a really important point for us to touch on. Is one of the reasons why Neutral selected Hines to partner with on property management is for this very reason, because it's something that's not common. And I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of property managers just come in and kind of do their property management, go through your traditional marketing, kind of have your nice quote unquote hospitality experience, not really taking it to the next level like Hines Lifestyle does. But really, one of the things that no one does that I know of right now is really optimizing and looking at the building operations like you guys do. And one of the reasons why that's so important for us is one of the things that we believe, and it is really part of our core thesis, is that due to all these initiatives that we're putting in, like Passive House, like reduction of operational energy in the building, we're able to reduce operational energy expense and thereby hopefully generate more income. And really, that has not been proven yet, which we've been very transparent about. And the only way we're going to prove it is through actually looking on a year-by-year basis at the building energy system and HVAC system and all the different systems in the building, and understanding, okay, was our original assumption in our energy model now actually playing out in the building on a day-by-day basis? And if not, how do we amend our operations so that we are following our energy model? And hopefully that, one, increases our bottom line and generates adequate return for investors, and two, to your point, extends the overall lifespan of these systems by 50 to 100%.
Yeah, spot on. And I think that's something we're certainly focused on here, given the investment made in those systems, is really bringing that sustainability mindset that Hines has to kind of auditing those operations and also, iterating the design thesis, as you think about the next building that Neutral does, bringing those learnings and feeding it back to the Neutral team.
Yeah, I think that's also critical. Like when we circle back to where we started, which I hope people realize what we're trying to do is kind of just walk you through how a life cycle of property management works, all the way from really just inception to post-stabilization and running the building. But as we start to iterate on more and more buildings and understand all the different systems we're using, like in Baker's Place, we're using a different HVAC system than in Edison, and same thing for 519 West Main. And so as we look at all of these, we'll be able to identify, okay, what systems are optimal and what ones do we want to repeat, and maybe what ones do we want to not use again. And I think this really allows us to do that.
No, I think that's a great point. And, in the maintenance requirements, are they what we thought they were? And kind of feed that back into it as well.
Yeah, it's really all part of this kind of iterative design construction process.
So the last kind of area that Nate had asked us to touch on is really just the Hines reporting. And so this is the way we're thinking about it, what we're going to be delivering to the Neutral project, and ultimately what they're going to be using to report back to all of you as the investors. And so, Hines comes from really an institutional ownership and client standpoint to reporting. And so for us, reporting accuracy accuracy the first time, and just the rigor that goes into something that's super important to how we see our service delivery. As I said earlier, we utilize the Entrada program management system for that. We use it for efficiency of centralized accounting, finance team that handles that reporting in combination with the on-site team. And so we really have, 3 different kind of levels of reporting that occurs. One is the daily reporting, which is really probably at the property level with the Hines team. So monitoring the traffic, the lead sources, applications, conversions. Are we hitting the criteria and the expenses that we want to, really the revenue drive, revenue side, top line revenue side, on a daily basis. Because what's really unique about multifamily is you're setting those leases, every day, every month. You're not firing and forgetting. 2, we look at kind of weekly reports. And so these are going to be weekly leasing reports, especially on the lease-up side. They're going to be, shared with the neutral team. We're going to be reporting back on leasing success, what's our leads, our tours, our sources, our applications, leases achieved, and the conversion rates. We're looking at our occupancy and lease percentage, looking at what we expected in the budget versus actual, and then also availability. So I didn't touch on this previously, but if a certain unit type is actually selling faster than the rest of the building, you actually, will want to push the revenue or the rents on that unit. And so you may actually say, as granular as this unit type on this corner of the building, we're going to increase the rents on that. But we're finding this interior unit on another face is not moving. It's actually lagging. We might want to drop rents a little bit. And then on a net basis, we'll grow the overall revenue. And then just looking at the availability really on a forward basis. And so you're constantly looking over the horizon. And so, are there notices you've received for people moving out, forward-looking leases, units that are available to rent, and are they ready in terms of, have you prepared them physically to receive the next resident? So you're constantly kind of looking out, at that next 30, 60 days, and as well as kind of, how you're thinking about the strategy for renewal terms that you're going to offer to people as they come up, and where do you price that? And then the monthly reporting is what I'll call the more kind of standard reporting. And so this is when you're going to have a monthly reporting package. You're going to see cash flows, you're going to see revenue sources, you're going to see detail by kind of major categories, and kind of an executive summary of how the building operated during that period, and where there may have been challenges and where there were moments of celebration on that monthly basis. So with that, Nate, that kind of rounds out, I think, my prepared talking notes on these subjects, but would open it up to you and any questions you may have.
Yeah, just for a point there on the reporting aspect, the monthly report is what we will be issuing to and kind of compiling to investors in our average quarterly reports. So the monthly reports will kind of just be compiled into one, and then every 3 months as normal, the investors, as you're used to, will get your quarterly report. But if anyone wants the daily or weekly or monthly and wants to track it with us, we're happy to share it with you if that's something that you want to dig into and get into the weeds on. And so, but no, I don't think I have any other questions, Mike. I really appreciate you spending the time to come on and talk to us about property management and educate us of how you go through pre-development all the way through post-stabilization, and look forward to continuing working with you on Baker's Place, 519 Edison, and all the projects to come.
Great. Well, I just want to say how honored Hines is to have been selected as a partner. There's other providers that Nate, you and Neutral could have selected, and we're very excited about this partnership. We think culturally we're really aligned, and Hines as a private company, we're not out to just gain scale in our management platform just for the sense of scale. We really look for ways that we feel like we're really well aligned in our service delivery, where quality and sustainability is valued. And again, thank you for this opportunity. Really appreciate it. And thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Of course. Thanks, Mike. Talk to you soon.